Welcome back guys. Happy New Year to everyone. Hope your this year goes more cool and interesting than previous one. And also good luck with your New Year resolution. Anyways, today again we gonna discuss about a sequel. Yes, Dragon Age 4. Compiled with all latest reveals of previous year and now so far. Let's start. Dragon Age 4 is coming to get the gang back together. At some point, anyways. After the ending of Dragon Age Inquisition's final DLC made it obvious that the story of Thnkx was far from over. We have been waiting for the fourth game in the series to finally arrive. BioWare spent years artfully dodging confirmation that a fourth game was in the works, but now they've stopped being coy and said they're working on the next Dragon Age game. Confirmation aside, we still don't know a lot of hard details. We do finally know its name, so we can stop calling it Dragon Age 4. But information has otherwise been coming at a yearly drip. Reports have claimed that Dragon Age 4 has abandoned a focus on multiplayer elements and been retooled as an entirely single-player game, and BioWare has since described it as a single-player focused experience. That may be a big deal, as we've been wondering how EA's online service game aspirations would trickle into BioWare's historically single-player series. Thanks to Dragon Age Day on December 4th, BioWare dropped an exciting in-game cinematic that was narrated by lovable storyteller and chess hair extraordinaire, Varric Tethras. Giving us a recap of Solas and his goal, the cinematic appears to suggest that Varric and his crossbow Bianca will be making a comeback in Dreadwolf. It's been 8 years since our last trip to Thnkx, but Dreadwolf presents a chance for longtime fans to return once more and new players to jump right into the series. BioWare has stated that Dragon Age 4's story will be one that all players can enjoy, regardless of if you've played a Dragon Age entry before. So there's plenty of reasons to get excited, regardless of your knowledge of the series. According to GamesBeat, people with knowledge of the BioWare title confirmed the game is on track for release in 2023. In this age of the pandemic, any release date can change, but the date makes sense with what we've seen so far. A blog post revealed that Dragon Age 4 is now in the alpha stage of development, with the BioWare team now being able to play the game from start to finish in its entirety. Up to this point, we've been working hard on the various parts of the game, but it's not until the alpha milestone that a game all comes together. Now, for the first time, we can experience the entire game, from the opening scenes of the first mission to the very end. We can see, hear, feel, and play everything as a cohesive experience. The blog post goes on to say that the game is not finished by any means, but this milestone indicates that it's now closer to completion. Despite the fact that the game's development had long been an open secret, Dragon Age 4 was only officially announced by BioWare a couple of years ago. Since then, BioWare has kept its cards pretty close to its chest. Neither a release date nor a release window has been announced. EA's 2019 earnings call had a note about Dragon Age 4 that suggests we won't see it released for several years yet. During the call, the company's CFO Blake Jorgensen said that the game probably comes after fiscal 22. This lines up with a 2021 report from GamesBeat's Jeff Grubb, who claims that multiple sources familiar with the project have said the game is on track for a 2023 release. Jeff Grubb stuck by his 2023 estimate in a February 2022 episode of his Giant Bomb video series Grubb Snacks. In that, Grubb said that the game is in very good shape, but that it's still at least 18 months out, and suggested that we may not get our hands on it until maybe late 2023 at the earliest. Shortly after this report, BioWare posted an official development update, stating that the game is right in the middle of production, and promised further updates later this year. Basically, it looks like the game won't be with us until 2023 at the earliest. We do know that progress is coming along steadily. In October 2022, BioWare General Manager Gary McKay announced that Dreadwolf had reached its internal alpha milestone. We can experience the entire game, from the opening scenes of the first mission to the very end, McKay said. Prior to that, the latest tiny crumb of a clue circling the internet was a tweet from game director Corinne Bush in August 2022, with a picture of a PS5 controller that said Couch Coffee controller and ready to play. Between that and the alpha milestone, progress is feeling promising for those Dragon Age fans who have been waiting 8 years for a new game. As such, we think that even mid-2023 is even a bit of an optimistic target, to our minds, although EA and BioWare might well have the resources to spin it up more quickly than we're expecting. An official blog post on the game from BioWare confirmed that it's in the middle of the production phase of its development, which is a good sign, although that still leaves it a long way off release. We got a small update in June 2022, confirming the game's title Dragon Age Dreadwolf, and the promise that more would be revealed at some point in 2022. Then, in late October 2022, EA and BioWare confirmed that the game had reached its alpha milestone, playable from start to finish, which is always a major moment in a game's development. EA has previously indicated that the game won't make it out before the end of 2022's fiscal year, and a recent VentureBeat report indicated that 2023 is the most likely release year for the project. That's been backed up by industry insider Jeff Grubb, who thinks it will arrive in 2023 at the earliest, so don't expect it any day now. Platforms haven't been officially confirmed yet, given its release date seems to be a while off, and a Gamescom 2020 clip made mention of next-generation technology. It's likely that Dragon Age 4 Dreadwolf will skip PS4 and Xbox One, coming to PS5, Xbox Series X and S, and PC instead. When it comes to which platforms Dragon Age Dreadwolf is likely to appear on, we can be a little bit more confident. Given the timescale, and the fact that the game is still in fairly early development, it's very likely to be aimed at next-gen consoles only, coming out on the PS5 and Xbox Series X and S, and skipping their forebears. That's become all the more likely after eagle-eyed leaker Jeff Grubb confirmed it with sources, after a former BioWare employee's LinkedIn profile started things off by indicating the next-gen platforms as targets for the game. Of course, Dragon Age is also an absolute favorite for PC gamers, who can get a little more in-depth with their strategic play, thanks to a mouse and keyboard, so it'll be dead certain to come to the PC as well. Sadly, none of the Dragon Age games has so far come to a Nintendo console, and with the Switch's limited power, we think that'll continue to be the case this time. We've been operating on this assumption for years now, given the less than subtle ending of Dragon Age Inquisition's final DLC, a 2019 report about the game's development, and the short story collection called Thnkx from 2020. BioWare finally confirmed it in their huge studio history book, BioWare Stories and Secrets from 25 years of game development. Thnkx has yet to appear in a Dragon Age game properly, though the country run by mages is often mentioned, and we've had several party members from up north. The glimpse of Thnkx capital Minrithis we saw in the 2020 Game Awards teaser had an almost cyberpunk feel to it, with the colorful urban nighttime and floating central segment. It's possible that, like Inquisition, Dreadwolf will not be set just in one country, but will visit other nations as well. BioWare's studio history book includes some of the same concept art that we've seen in their behind-the-scenes video from summer 2020. Among the small selection of artwork chosen for the page are the necropolis in Nevera and an anti-Van Crow assassin, suggesting that we could be visiting both locations as part of the story, and the deep roads too. We're probably not escaping a Dragon Age game without a visit underground. It will certainly be an RPG, or so one would assume. But beyond that, any real details about Dragon Age Dreadwolf are still very hush-hush. From Kotaku's 2019 report on the first version of the sequel, codenamed Joplin, a large chunk of Joplin would center on heists. The developers talked about building systemic narrative mechanics, allowing the player to perform actions like persuading or extorting guards without the writers having to handcraft every scene. The goal was to focus as much as possible on choice and consequence, with smaller areas and fewer fetch quests than Dragon Age Inquisition. Game development is a highly iterative process, especially so at BioWare, according to Kotaku's reports on both Dragon Age and Anthem. Dragon Age Dreadwolf has definitely changed staff, and has likely changed vision as well since then. It's still possible that BioWare is attempting to make a smaller, denser open world for Dreadwolf after player critique that Inquisition's open world felt somewhat empty. In a post to BioWare's blog following the teaser trailer from December 2018, then producer Mark Dara wrote that, "We have been building a new team around a core of Dragon Age veterans, people I've worked with on Dragon Age, Jade Empire, and some of whom I've worked with since the Baldur's Gate days." While that may just be a way to reassure players of the quality the team that will produce for Dreadwolf, it might also mean that BioWare is looking to channel its earliest CRPG roots for its next game. Each Dragon Age game has felt pretty distinct. Origins had more tactical combat, Dragon Age 2 was more action-packed, and Inquisition was somewhere in the middle, depending on how you played it. Whether combat is more involved or simpler, though, some other things are likely to be guaranteed. We should get a fairly lengthy story with dozens of characters to talk to, and influence, and dialogue trees that give plenty of choice in terms of approach. Dragon Age has so far also shied away from a true open-world experience, preferring large hub areas that you can travel between for a more detailed approach to each location. So it'll be interesting to see if that structure reappears. One of the only real criticisms of Inquisition was that its areas could feel a little overlarge at times, so we'll see if the next game makes these a bit denser too. However, one thing we can seemingly rule out is the game having multiplayer. This was apparently a major part of EA's plan for the franchise. However, the poor return from games like Anthem, paired with major success from single-player titles Star Wars Jedi Fallen Order, has persuaded EA to stick with Dragon Age's roots. According to a big Bloomberg report, this is very much what BioWare wanted, so hopefully, that means we see a truer version of what they're imagining the game will be when it eventually releases. In the Gamescom trailer, lead writer Patrick Weeks described how Dreadwolf's story will diverge from Inquisition. For the game we're working on now, we want to tell the story of what happens when you don't have power. What happens when the people in charge aren't willing to address the issues. Weeks said, now that we know the game will be set in Tevenor, that's starting to make a lot more sense. From the sound of it, BioWare is aiming for the story and its characters to feel a little less important to the world than in Inquisition. Dragon Age games have typically followed the rise of a seemingly inconsequential hero to a position of power, though it almost sounds as if Dreadwolf will follow a character who never breaks into Theda's traditional power structures. BioWare said in a community update that it aims for Dreadwolf to be a game that carries forth the stories that came before it, while still being a starting point for someone brand new, meaning players can jump into it without knowing the franchise well at all. In terms of actual story details, the teaser trailer BioWare debuted in 2020 is pretty ambiguous, but there are some big points we can still draw from it. It sounds from the voiceover like we'll be taking on a new character, not returning to fill the shoes of the illustrious Inquisitor we played last time around. Indeed, this character seemingly won't be a prophesied chosen one, but someone ordinary who'll reach extraordinary heights. Furthermore, there are a couple of characters we can say with confidence will appear, namely, rugged dwarf Varric Tethras, who narrates the trailer after his starring role in both Dragon Age 2 and Inquisition. Will he be up for his third consecutive appearance as a party member? Then there's the likely big bad for the game Solas, the Dreadwolf whose presence seemed so helpful throughout Inquisition before that game's final twist revealed him to be very evil. Given we now know the game is named after him, Solas is clearly going to be a huge part of the game's story.